All right, so it is time and we are going to get started for our Cultivation Across the Nation panel. I am so excited to be moderating this panel with such an esteemed group of panelists from across the country, West Coast, East Coast, and everywhere in between. So without further ado, if you could please introduce yourselves and then tell us a little bit about your company.
Should I stand up? Sit down? Just because I'm short. Hi everybody. I'm Andrea Lantz. I'm a co-owner of Plymouth County Growers Growing Supplies. We just opened last year in September, so we're approaching our second year. I'm also the co-founder of Plymouth County Growers. That's what we were before and still continue to be, but we also are running a growing supplies store as well. So we pride ourselves in giving advice, along the way of people growing from seed to finish, whether it's indoor, outdoor, in whatever size space you have to grow in. And that's about it for now.
My name is Rick Naya, considered the great-grandfather of hybrid cannabis just recently. The executive director of New Hampshire NORML, and I'm New Hampshire's primary state cannabis activist and lobbyist. I write our rules for our 126X medical bills. I am also the sponsor and writer of our decriminalization bill, and just recently our 2019 0028, I hope, the final legalization intent bill that I've had to write for New Hampshire. I am also the Cannabis Commission's counsel. I own New Hampshire Cannabis Freedom Festival, as I mentioned earlier, and I've spent the last about 15 years doing between 300 and 400 concerts a year, 12 to 15 festivals in the cannabis community and music community throughout New England. And I'd like to thank the citizens that support me and ask me to be their voice in New Hampshire to help bring common sense policy for all citizens and not just those few. And that's what I do. I'm basically the protector of cannabis in New Hampshire. Thank you for having me.
I'm Danko. I'm the senior cultivation editor of High Times magazine. Been there about 17 years, cultivating for about 30 years. Judged probably more cannabis cups than anyone else alive or on earth, I guess. And I have a book out called Cannabis, A Beginner's Guide to Growing Marijuana. It's an entry-level beginner book because I think the way to avoid what people fear now with legalization is this corporatization of cannabis. And I think as long as we can grow our plants and keep our seeds alive and our genetics thriving, we don't have to be any part of that. You don't have to worry about Monsanto or Marlboro or any of that stuff. As long as we can grow our own and pool together in a sort of a open source kind of way, share the genetics, share the knowledge, and do it all for the love of the plant because it's a healing flower. So basically, that's who I am, and want to encourage you guys to grow it and process it properly as well, drying and curing and all that. So thank you very much.
I learned a lot from Danny in my early days too. So, but hi, I'm Rick with Mosca Seeds. We started with the love and passion for a plant that our good esteemed colleague here, Rick from Brothers Grimm, created, Cinderella 99. And really, it was a passion for preserving and protecting the strain for future generations is how my company got started. And it became so popular that we branched off into other strains. And you might know some of the raspberry boogies, moonshine cookies, blotto, and so on and so forth. And so now the company is worldwide. We have a great following in Europe through our distributor there. And we do this for the love and passion of the plant. So thanks.
sit down. Hi, I'm Professor P. Chris from Dynasty Genetics. I've been growing cannabis, breeding at the same time for 20 years. I've just started for self-sustainability, and I think that everybody else should too. Kind of hitting on Danny, what he said. I think it's very important right now, more than any time, is to stick together and work together, share information, and also try to hold tight those genetics and keep them alive, keep that going. But yeah, I'm a patient advocate first and foremost. I'm here in Mass because it's legal and I can be here. It's great. I feel privileged to speak with these fellas and women. Yeah, that's it.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Rick Campanella. That's my real name. I go by Mr. Soul in this business. I'm the original creator of Cinderella 99, as Rick, my friend down at the other end of the table, alluded to. And his is a story that I'm proud of, and there are lots of others like that where Cinderella 99 was able to inspire or launch other companies or people in their passion for this, growing marijuana. A substance that's not addictive to smoke, but addictive to grow, And so it's been since the 80s, basically, that I've been growing, breeding, and when I graduated college, I got hired by a company in Amsterdam that was a big seed company at the time called Super Sativa Seed Club, and I guess I learned so much so fast by being in their, under their wing, and so like everybody else, I've stood on the shoulders of giants to reach that next level and so on and so forth. And that brings us to what we're doing here today. Cinderella 99 will be 20 years anniversary next year, 2019. And it was created in Revere, just north of Boston here, in my basement over the course of a couple of years of continually back crossing to the same female to arrive at this final goal that I was trying to get to with that strain. And that was sort of the backbone of the company. And then since then, like Rick, we think of new things and create new strains. And this year, Danko's publication, High Times Magazine, chose one of my strains, Rosetta Stone, as one of the top 10 of 2018. So it keeps happening here, decades later. We're still firing on all cylinders at Brothers Grimm, and I love the life, and I'm sort of at the age of getting into a sort of easy period of retiring from the workaday engineering kind of life of going into an office and trying to squeeze in the other stuff on the side and doing this full time. So very gratifying to not only be here, but to have reached this point in life and career. Thanks for being here.
So my next question for the group of panelists is, what inspired you to start working with the cannabis plant or to start cultivating?
For me, it was like the amazement of having grown up watching seeds go in the ground in my backyard and, nothing ever happening. And wondering well, why doesn't this work? Or if something did grow, didn't last long, and the climate being from Northeast, like y'all for around here, I lived in upstate New York, and it just wasn't marijuana growing climate, and so it was very frustrating as a kid and a teenager that I liked this stuff and I liked to smoke it, and I thought, if I could grow it would be great, but I just thought I was null and didn't know how to do it or something. And then I was in college and I read a book by Jorge Cervantes. It's kind of like Danny's book where, it's an introduction to people, and I'm like, here's everything you need to know to do it, There was a moment, I guess I'll finish my dissertation here by just saying the specific answer to the question would be that it was that moment when I read in the book that if you shorten shorten the light cycle to 12 hours a day, it'll make the plant start flowering. I was like, that's what does it? It's just like this eureka moment. I wanted to run out into the street naked screaming or something. And it's like, wow, I'm so powerful now. I have this superpower. I can make these plants do my bidding. So that was it.
Hey, I guess the reason why I started growing was because I was getting a lot of, different I don't know, strains or just not knowing what strains you're getting out on the street from people. And I needed it medically, so I wanted to know what I was growing, you know, so I then learned about sativas and indicas and like, you know, what would help, you know, what I needed. And I also knew what I was putting into it, so I, you know, wanted to grow organically. And then, you know, with the information that I learned growing and all of that, I wanted to share with other people and share my medicine as well with other people. So my husband and I, we got a place in Maine, and he became a caregiver, and, you know, we grew there for a while. And we also were growing, you know, in Plymouth County for ourselves as well, you know, for our own medicine. And, you know, we opened a grow store because we wanted to be able to have access to the products that we use, you know, when we needed them, and then to be able to share what we've learned in the products that we use with other people. And we continue to learn that there's, you know, new products out there that are, you know, really good products to try. And we love to share what we've learned, but it can be confusing on what to use when you go out there. So we wanted to be able to help people with, you know, any kind of questions they had. So opening the grow store also gave us an opportunity to be able to like offer classes if people, you know, wanted to spend more time with us, kind of thing, or whatever you guys need is what we want to help you with. So that's why I started growing. It was for me and to share my knowledge with others.
Ooh, that's kind of a tough one to follow. What got me involved in growing, I think, was the question, wasn't it? For me, it's going to be a little bit different like everybody else, but for me, at the age of 13, I was in the woods camping with a few of my friends, and we were drinking and smoking grass, and we heard a sound in the sky, which was a plane. And this is in the western portion of Palm Beach County. This is like in the Everglades, deep in the Everglades. And I hauled off and said, "It's a dope plane," and they all laughed. And we all laughed at first until we noticed some lights creating an airstrip. And then we got scared because we saw silhouettes of men with guns and put the fire out. So after the regalia occurred and they hauled off all their cannabis, we ran over and we found our cannabis, and we loaded up a bunch of cannabis, and it was Colombian gold. And we brought it home, and back in the day, you know, cannabis had seeds, and there really wasn't much of the sensimilla. The word wasn't quite used, in fact, at the time. And that was cool. We had the Colombian, and I sold a bunch of it, and then a friend of mine was going to Hawaii, and I said, "Hey, take a couple $100 and bring back some Hawaiian weed." And he was like, "Yeah." Back in our day, they didn't check luggage or anything. You just traveled. And he came back with the ounces, and lo and behold, the last ounce, last bud, 2 seeds popped out. Now, mind you, I'm 13. I'm a cool 13, but so what? They were seeds. We didn't think of seeds like that as we do now, as Mosca in the day. I mean, nowadays, you find a seed in some of our rare varieties, it's like, ah, you know, the glory of God came upon us. But that's just what happened. And I planted the Hawaiian and the Colombian, 2 internationally opposite strains, an indica and a sativa, and lo and behold, my Gainesville Green occurred, which was the very first American hybrid in the nation, according to some of the genetic studies that we've heard, and there's some research, one of the beginnings of our hybrids. So I was honored with that, which was a blessing. But apart from that, what brought me into it more than anything, and I think most of us can attest to, you know, Cervantes and Ed Rosenthal, and there was a few others that, there was a few others that were writing at the time that were publishing books about how to grow cannabis, and it was really kind of a shock in the day because at the time, the Nixon administration had just gone through all of the universities and libraries and medical facilities to remove all of the cannabis data for any certain form of research. So what came up was this really groovy Bible, and I got it, and I thought, this is great. And my dad owned a large construction company, and I got a light off of a light pole, and I brought it into my closet, and I cut the end of the cable, and I stuck the 2 cords into the buds, and it went on. And And that was the beginning of my indoor grows. And with the help of the books, we started growing not only the Gainesville Green, which went on to foster a lot of other hybrids, but we worked on the Micanopy Purple and the Okeechobee Purple. There was a few of these earlier Florida varieties that were really quite high test, even for its day. And then it made its way to Washington, where there's still some confusion as to whether it was the Gainesville Green that they blended that in with the Afghani that became the skunk and under the Northern Lights or not, but from my family and friends, I can assure you it was. So onward and forward, we move into the new millennial with all these fancy varieties that we've designed and we can develop, and these strains that are out there. I like what we had followed through. It's a collective. It's an organism of people giving credence to one another for cannabis that we've protected. And as we protect our legacies that we developed and design and we share with others, we try to share the knowledge to move forward and able to share these genetics with others to hope that they don't get trampled on by the Monsanto CGWs, and that we're able to do it at home and keep these lovely genes and flowers of medicine to help us move forward. So that's what kind of got me into it. Just something fell out of the sky and I ran with it.
Yeah, so my aha moment, I always enjoyed cannabis from a very young age. And then a friend showed me his grow. He had a very small closet, and he had a 400 watt light in there. I think it was a street lamp that he had reconfigured. And I just realized that you can create this thing. You didn't need acres and acres of fields in South America. You could do it right in your home. And that really, changed things for me. And I got more interested and I started growing. Went over to Amsterdam and saw this, this would be the mid-90s, early 90s, and picked up genetics from over there and really started rolling with it and got interested in hydroponics and all of that. And now at this point I've come back full circle to the idea that we should be recreating nature as closely as possible, and living soil and no-till gardening and sun-grown is really the future of this plant. It doesn't need to be produced in these artificial environments and stuff. But again, on a personal level, a grow tent is a great way for an individual or a beginner or whoever to produce enough cannabis for themselves and their friends, to the point where you're giving it away, because even in just a small space you can produce a good amount. And so that was the aha moment for me. It's the quality is better, so it's produced for pennies to the dollar of what you would pay for something. You know exactly what strain it is, as was mentioned, the importance of that, whether it be medicinal or just as a connoisseur. And it's fun. It's actually a really fun thing to do. And there's nothing more fun than popping seeds as well. So in finding something new, right? I mean, these guys are breeders, so they know all about that. And that's really, there's so much fun in the actual act of growing too. And it can be therapeutic too, medicinally, to create your own medicine. So I just really enjoy it, and I encourage people to try it, or if they can't do it themselves, to form some sort of collective where someone's growing, another person's making edibles, another person's producing this, and you're sharing together, and that way keeping out sort of the greed of the creeping sort of monster of the business of it all.
Oh, such good stories. Mine actually started at a young age of somewhere between 12 and 13 years of age. Growing up in the Midwest, we had family who lived in Iowa, and we traveled to visit them. And when we got there, cousins that were my age said, "Hey, let's go over by the cornfields." And they said, "Have you ever seen this? These massive 16 to 20 foot hemp plants." We knew nothing of what marijuana was, and so we took these paper bags, grocery paper bags, full back. We hid it in the station wagon with us, and we tried to smoke it, and we didn't know what curing was. We put apples in there. We had all these stories, and but I think that just illustrates the excitement and what we were going through at that time. Moving forward to my college days, I started reading these wonderful books by Rob Clark and Ed Rosenthal, Bill Frank, and so on, Jorge Cervantes. The light just turned on. That excitement that I experienced at an early age just came back, and on and off I've been growing, and now I've been breeding for a good 12 years, and that passion is just, the growing is addictive to it, and every time you pop new seeds, it's something different, exciting, you learn more, and every time, when you learn something, that just those little kernels of information, you realize how much you don't know and how much there is still more to learn about it, and that's really where my passion comes from, so thanks.
Well, let's see. Mine started prior to what I'm going to tell you, but 96, I ended up moving out west to Oregon from New York at the age of 18. I was just done with it. It was like, I'm going here. I loved cannabis. I brought probably 300, 400 seeds with me. Moved out to Mount Hood, out of all places, very desolate, small community. I grew up in New York, so I didn't say shit. As soon as I got into employee housing, I told my friend that I moved out there with, I was like, I'm gonna start these seeds. It's like, man, you can't start those seeds. All you got is a fluorescent. Like, no, I'm gonna start these seeds. So I started these seeds, and from that moment, I remember they cracked ground in this 4 foot fluorescent 2-fixture, and I grew them and harvested them. I didn't even know how to sex, didn't know how to do anything, just started and somehow harvested these seeds. I grew them chemically, had no clue what I was doing. But I started just to be self-sufficient. I started to grow more. So I stumbled into breeding by just growing for sustainability. I wanted to grow for myself, and then I started growing for friends. I was making seeds before I ever took a clone or grew a clone. So my approach in this is much different than many people I talk to, but we all share, knowledge where, how we are here today. And I was into the first strain I started was a skunk. It was a Florida skunk I got from my friend in New York. He was an older guy I looked up to. He was the one person that gave me grower information before anyone else. He was very discreet about what he did, but I knew he had something going on because he always had like the best weed. Everybody else had brickweed. And one night it was, he kind of opened up to me after a little bit, but one night, and this like kind of changed my whole perspective before it even started, but he comes in the room and has this bud. It's like, I don't know, bigger than this forearm, 1.5 to 2 foot cola. He's like, look at this bud. And I'm just, holy shit, young kid. I was 15 or something at the time, 16, and just blown away. And he pulls out this other one. He's got these 2 buds, and the one's like, the size of a quarter. He's like, which one do you think's better? And I'm just like, that big one, that's like a giant bud. He shakes his head, he's like, no, look closer. And I'm like, what? Get a little closer, and sure enough, it was coated with crystals, and right there, it just, I had it was quality over quantity. Like right from the get-go, which I am so appreciative for, that I never went for that rat race of production, which so many people have, gone through at some point in their life, trying to produce more and more. And now it's, I'm glad to be riding this niche out from 20 years ago, that it's quality. It was never about production or producing more. It was about quality. And it quickly evolved into My roommate at the time, when I was working with a skunk line, there was a certain line because there was chunky pheno, taller plants, and this particular one that we gravitated towards, he had severe seizures and epilepsy, and we were kids at the time. I was 18. We were snowboarding every day. We didn't really like, oh, this is medical. We were smoking it every day. And I noticed that it helped. He never had seizures when he was with me because we were always smoking weed. I didn't drink at the time, and his buddies that he would drink with, he had a couple seizures when I was, with him. He was my roommate, but it was always when he was shit-faced drunk and, not talking about alcohol, weed better or anything, but I noticed a medical factor of this plant, very early, and so that got some things ticking in my brain, like, wait a second, if this is working for him, I started going towards that route, and inbreeding this line, it was the first line I worked was that skunk, and ended up inbreeding it so far that there was nothing left. It was bottlenecked to the point where it was, I had an epiphany, like, I fucked up. I didn't selectively breed, it didn't keep some of the older generations. I was just gung-ho at this target, and just trying to learn as I progress with my breeding skills and goals. It shifted from going to that skunk to one of my best friends losing his leg in a snowboard wreck, getting addicted on morphine, couldn't get off it, and it was like, to me, it was heartbreaking to see, and that was another turning point where I actually started growing indicas. I didn't, I'm busy, I like doing stuff, activities, sativas work for me. Then it opened my mind, like, wait, this isn't about me. This is, my friend, he's like dead, hollow soul, empty body. So, I ended up working this Oregon Afghani into these lines, and that was like the big part of where Dynasty started. It was, and it went from that, like, medical patient to medical patient. It got to the point where it was, it got bigger than I could handle. I had no anticipation or, to how big it was going to get, or no intention to starting a seed company. I didn't see the plan as something to gain from rather than something to give to others. So that's kind of still my mantra, and that's what I do, and going to continue to do that. And I still develop lines for multiple people. I'm working in the rec industry in Oregon, but I also have another company I started, Relic Seeds, which is where my passion lies. It's preservation, it's CBD, medical lines that aren't driven by the market, because the market is going to tell you what to do at some point, and you're going to come to that turning point where you either go one way or the other, or you can go both ways, so I'm going to leave it at that, though. It's where it started.
Fantastic answers, and everybody's come from different places. There we go. Maybe you'd like to be down. So, for our next question, I would like to ask our panelists, since we come from so many diverse places, because this is geared toward kind of newer cultivators, what are some of the mistakes that you've seen first-time growers make, and then what advice would you give them to alleviate it?
There's an old adage I always go by, that a beginner never underdoes anything. So that's what you have to watch out for if you're starting out in this, is that you're going to overdo everything, and you have to guard against that. Over watering, over fertilizing, over everything. And that includes a thing I call the gee whiz factor. You'll hear about these cool ways of growing weed or some new product that you should try, and you have something that's kind of working right now. Don't change what works to try some new fad. Hydroponics would be like the thing that, okay, my first 6 months of growing, I'm like, no, soil, the hell with it. I'm jumping right into this hydroponic thing because it's got this gee whiz factor. It's so cool and simple. Don't over taking care of your plants. They're gonna grow. It's a weed. It kind of needs you to leave it alone and not baby it too much. That's my biggest advice I could give to a beginner.
I agree a lot with what he said. That was, I feel the same way. A lot of what we get when people come in our stores, they have a lot of the same issues. They're overwatering, they're overfeeding because they're so excited about growing, which I'm excited that everyone is so excited about growing because it's just great that everybody can at home, you know. But that it does seem to be the biggest issue is that, or just not having the right lighting or something like that too. Expecting to get like large results, you know, when you're using smaller lights or, you know what I mean? Just kind of help throughout the whole thing. Or they want a pH, so they over pH. And I feel like if you just start off with a good soil, a nice organic soil that has a lot of the nutrients in it that you're looking for, and just water to start off with, and just watch your plant grow, a nice light, you know, that you can afford. Sometimes you can only afford, you know, like a fluorescent light to begin with, and you know, you can get a growth through that, but you're not probably going to get a big yield. So I think just learn how to grow the plant first, enjoy growing, and then upgrade as you go along and learn is how I would fix that, you know, if you were having issues. And just talk to people too, like come to the grocery store, get good advice, like try not to listen to everything that you hear or see online, you know, actually talk to the people that are growing, you know, or have been growing for a while. And that's it.
Yeah, mistakes that I think early growers make are, like you said earlier, that they get anxious and they want it to grow faster. They believe if they water it or give it more nutrients or more organics or some new sauce or something that's going to make it miraculously turn into some, you know, Cannabis Cup Award winning championship that Danny's going to pen in. Really, I think there's a synchronicity that early growers need to have initially when they step into this kind of arena. We get a lot of guys that step in and we get a beginner's luck. And it happens a lot. They get 2 or 3, 4 or 5 harvests down their belt and they're sitting real proud of themselves, making a couple dollars. Finally, they pay their equipment off and wham! Oh, what happened? You didn't clean your room out. There's mold all over everything now. You didn't clean your shoes off. There's all these little angles that we have to address as growers. So if you're going to do it, keep it simple. Super the KIS is pretty good outdoors. And if you are going to grow organic, remember something that we don't sit around drinking chocolate shakes all day long every day without drinking water. And plants need water. They naturally need it. And I think that a crisis that's occurred throughout the years, I've come to find, even with testings, that the over-mineralization and over-fertilization and nutrients that we're trying to cram down our plants' throats is beyond their own even molecular composition. They don't deserve it, they don't need it. They could amply do this on their own with the right genetics and having a not a divine intervention, but your own intervention, one that melds with the plant in harmony of yourself. If you're going to do it for medicine or if you're doing it recreationally, these plants are like anything else. That's what an EMC pins for, or an electromagnetic field that they have in the water or in their roots. Not only that, they emit an aura of their own, and they can sense what's going on in your room with you present or not. So when I say a symbiotic relationship, not only should we have one, they already have one within our endocannabinoid system. And as we know, the more in tune we are with the things that we do, the more reward we get later. So watch and listen to your plants. Be kind to them, they'll be kind to you. And don't feed them chocolate shakes too much, they don't like it all the time.
Yeah, so these guys are talking about overwatering and overfeeding, and I can't stress overfeeding enough. It's an epidemic basically. All of the nutrient brands will tell you to use enough of the product that it's overfeeding your plants. So feed lightly, water in between feedings with plain water is very wise advice. The other thing is don't put minor before major. That's kind of the adage I live by, where people are more concerned about like a tiny problem while other problems are existing in the space. So controlling the environment is so important. And not inviting problems into the grow room, like having dead leaves on the plants or puddles of water and dead leaves. I can't tell you how many professional gardens I've been in where there's situations that are basically invitations for problems like powdery mildew and spider mites and things. But they're more concerned with the music that they're playing to the plants being the bright music or something. So they're overlooking the major problem by focusing on a minor one. So it's light and food and water and air and staying within certain parameters and getting the things you need to stay within those parameters. That's important, whether it be a humidifier, a dehumidifier, an air conditioner, a chiller, or whatever it is. You control the environment and you create the environment that the plant wants to be in or doesn't want to be in. So I think those are the big mistakes, and also not flushing and not properly drying and curing at the end.
So, in effort to not sound redundant, everything that they just said, so not overdoing things, and then additionally not too much light. Now there's so many different lighting options. I think sometimes when folks start seedlings, they give it too much light and it burns the plants, or it's too much water, they damp off. So really be, less is more. But then also kind of what Andrea mentioned is growing other things. I always advocate growing vegetables, growing pumpkins, really building those green thumbs. And I think you learn a lot by nurturing other types of plants that can benefit you is growing cannabis. And because we have a garden every year, and some of the stuff that we use, the mycos, our pumpkins just go wild for it. Our tomatoes, it just, I think that is a real big benefit for a lot of beginners.
All really great points. And one thing that I would recommend, I did it, so I know everybody else can, is start from a clean slate. Everybody's trying to cut a corner and you haven't even started. They're like, I want this clone, I want this. And more times than not, you're bringing in a pathogen, a bug, a virus, something. So, starting from seed is definitely something to consider. And then also with overwatering, overdoing things. Often, I've mentored quite a few growers and patients. That was one big thing that I've done over the years, and I really believe in, is helping people just get on their feet. They have a problem, I'm going to try to help them solve it. But it happens time and time again. People get overconfident. They get a successful grow, and they just forget what they did. I spend a lot of time scrubbing buckets and cleaning the floor and grunt work. I take pictures of cannabis as much as I grow it, but there's a lot of grunt work and shitty stuff that does not get glorified. I spend a huge portion of the time cleaning, so that's what I'm going to leave that. Just
Fantastic. Chris, thank you for bringing up our next point, seeds. Do you have a preference for our panel, since we have such amazing growers and breeders, between regular seeds and feminized seeds? I feel like it's the great seed debate. Do you have a preference, and why?
Well, I just delivered a seminar earlier today on feminized seeds, and I'd like to get away from calling them that, first of all. It sounds sinister. It sounds like you did something to the seed that would have been normal and now it's not, like Frankenstein and feminized. They both have that same connotation in just the way they're spelled and pronounced. So what they really are female seeds. What happens is a pollen grain lands on a female flower, and if that pollen grain had a Y chromosome in it, it will be a male plant, and if it had an X chromosome in the pollen, it will be a female plant. So a female seed from a feminized pack of seeds is no different, just as if you knew a family where they had only daughters, and that daughter didn't have any brothers, and somehow she just isn't as good a mate for somebody as if she came from a family where she did have some brothers. It's a silly thing when you think about it, but it harkens back to how much sort of black magic and old wives' tales and that just permeate this whole culture because of the fact that we've been kept down and oppressed for 100 years. We tried to cultivate this plant and bring this into use in our communities and in our culture 100 years ago, and the big stomping boot came down from the government and squashed this plant because it competed with the people who were trying to cut down trees and make paper out of it, and people who were making plastic products that would have been displaced by this plant, and people who sell oil and other products. All of those kinds of things have kept this plant down, and through that process, old wives' tales permeate it. Like, next thing you know, they're going to be listening to jazz music, the whole reefer madness thing, right? So, don't believe what doesn't make sense. Here's what it is. What are we trying to do when we grow cannabis? Produce smokable or a plant that will be then extracted for its content of a usable drug. The male plant is virtually useless for any of that. So in an ideal world, all you would really ever want to grow are female plants. So why do people want to grow male and female plants? To breed them together, right? Okay. So if we could successfully breed two females together, why would we need a male, right? And if, when you're choosing two parents to create a specific kind of child, like begets like is the rule in breeding. So it's kind of hard to look at a male and determine what kind of daughters he's going to give you, right? Because he has no female traits to observe. Whereas if you're taking two female plants and crossing them together to make female seeds, you can observe the female qualities of both the parents and then predict much more accurately and much more reliably what the progeny is going to be like. So the future is probably breeding female to female, and there's virtually no need for a male at all. And that's how I feel about it.
Wow. I don't know. I feel like feminized seeds are easier for people to grow because you're most likely going to get a female. But if you were to just grow regular seeds, you have to go pick your phenos, like you have a lot of growing to do and a lot of work to do in picking the best ones that you'd like to grow and whether it's going to be a male or a female. So you can waste a lot of time doing that. Some people might find that a waste if you're a new grower. I just think it's easier to grow feminine seeds. But once you get into it and you're more, seasoned in growing, I think that you'll find growing regular seeds are more fun and you get more of a variety of strains to choose from. That's just my opinion.
My choice with seeds, it goes both ways, especially now in this day and age. With the versatility of feminized seeds and the advancements of the autoflowers, and it's indicative also of different profiles and things that we can use and gain from. And by going with the regular route, as I think many of us
started out in that, I guess, race. There's a lot of a challenge, because I think originally at first when I got going, it was a fluke, so to speak, but we began learning from what this Gainesville was and how we could change things. And we didn't realize, to be quite honest with you, because there was no real studies about how trichomes and what I call ROO, return of oil, or how much return of oil comes from different varieties. We weren't that advanced at the time. In fact, back in the day, we saw trichomes and we thought, what is that on your weed? Something's wrong. Clean your bag out, there's a bunch of sand in it. I'm not joking. That Keith, we thought, whoa, something's wrong with that. You dipped it in acid, we're gonna trip. No joke. But with the regular seeds, and me speaking, I 45 years of looking at males and looking at females and trying to find what we have today. And it was a challenge. It's not as easy as it looks. A lot of people got very lucky, very fortunate. They stepped in the game late in the race and were able to monopolize things like jet fuel and Gorilla Glue, the afterburner, which is really quite rare. And I got lucky on a regular pack. I got 2 males, so it's kind of like one of the rarest males in the world of some of the highest potency cannabis that exists. Does anybody have it? No. It's that rare. So finding regular seeds and these variables, the rareness of the crossbreeding and the genetics, that's the key. And then pheno hunting these males that, a lot of times I look at the males and I see they're all the same wispy little guys, out there trying to find their way, and then you'll see that one, this Marmaduke, this, what is that? That's one hell of a specimen. And that's the type of specimen that I might crossbreed into the Bambi, not the Marmaduke. And there's a lot going on with regular seeds and diversity. But leading a chromographic genetic makeup of cannabis for others to understand and use for medicinal purposes, and learning the genetic coding and those propensities within each individual, because we're all different, as is each plant. Those sciences are now becoming available to us. And very shortly, one of my companies and many others that are in the forefront of the genetics will be doing the swabbings for people's ills and designing chromiograph design cannabis specifically for what ails you. Now, we think about that, and it's like having a golden pill. And then we think about, where's the nature of it all? Whose hand is in this? Is it mine or some other higher power? We're the stewards of cannabis and its protectors and its warriors. So by protecting the cannabis at its regular state and its origins, we're able to make things and develop things without having the long arm of the industry. And we can keep our genetics privately in a collective of high-grade, purely grown, natural medicines that'll help our wellness and enlighten us, versus trying to turn it into that machine of genetic malformities. So I hope as we move forward here in the next 10 or 15 years, we start going back into our legacies, not solely on the land race, but all of the chromosomal aspects regarding my health and wellness and a plant that I will design, like my Annihilator, or Danny's Danko, for him, who knows? But genetics and regular seeds versus feminized, things start changing.
What changes? Tell me something that's different.
Well,
I'd love to debate that.
friendly.
Well,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I thought we were
We're not here to debate, though, are we?
No, I guess we're not. I misunderstood the term. So.
You like it feminized seeds?
Well, I explained why too, but you drifted off into God knows where you were going with that. So carry on.
So for me, I don't have any skin in the game really, except to report on it. But it really depends on what you're trying to do, what your purpose is, right? So if you're growing for production, So it's really what your purpose is. There's a place for these different things, right? So autoflowers, for instance, if you're far from the equator or you're at high altitudes and you have short seasons to grow in, they're great. If you're in Europe and you're just lazy and you want to just plant seeds and walk away and come back in 75 days and harvest, great. You're going to grow these autoflowers. They're just going to flower automatically, of course, and then you're going to make hash out of that and mix that with tobacco or whatever. There's a purpose for those things for different reasons, and feminized seeds as well. There's a purpose for them, and there's a tremendous benefit for you if that's what you're looking for, to grow from seed and to have all the seeds grow out as females. But if you're growing a mother plant, for instance, and you want hybrid vigor, you may want a regular seed, in which case you're going to grow a mother plant from that, and you're going to take clones from that, and that's going to be your production garden, right? And in that case, you want to know if that regular seed is female or male. Well, you take a clone of the seedling and you flower the clone. You root the cutting and you grow that and you flower that. You leave the seedling itself in the vegetative state, and you let the clone tell you the sex of that. That's how you would determine the sex of the plant without flowering it and then sending it back into the vegetative stage, which can be stressful, right? So there's a place for all these different things, and clearly, if you look in Europe, you'll see that they don't buy regular seeds. Almost 100% of the seed market over there is feminized seeds, and now they have autoflowering, and they have CBD-rich autoflowering hazes. So there's diversity going on throughout the gene pool, and there's a place for all of it, for sure. But if you're not breeding and you're just growing, there's really no need to grow males at all for any reason. So you need to get rid of the males anyway, and wasting time growing males is a pain in the ass. And so that's where feminized seeds can be a huge benefit. So there's a place for all of it, and there's a future that we don't know out there, as well as genetic modification is taking place. And that's not what feminization is about, as he mentioned earlier. That's not genetic modification. That's just a form of breeding. It's selfing, or it's taking that pollen and using it on different females to create female-only seeds. And there's obviously a place for it. And it's not the same as genetic modification, where you're taking a frog gene and adding it to a tomato. I mean, that's a completely, entirely different thing that's happening, and that's actual genetic modification, which may be down the pike, but isn't happening quite yet that I know of.
What an interesting question. So I think there's a place for both feminized and regular seeds. Like Danny had mentioned, in Europe, the majority of sales there are feminized seeds, which is why we started feminized seeds several years ago, because the market demands it. And one thing I would advise you is to make sure that when you buy feminized seeds, you buy them from reputable companies who test out the offspring, and knowing that 95, 96% of those seeds will be feminized, but then you will have some males out of that. So just be sure that you're buying from reputable companies, so you're assured that you're not going to get Hermes and ruin your whole crop and the time that you're investing time and money. But then also with regular seeds, that's where our real fun and passion really comes from, creating new, diverse strains And with breeders today, they have all these different shortened life cycles, so we're able to get multiple generations in a relatively short period of time, and successive generations, and working those generations to really create superior flowers. Yep.
Yeah, I'm with Rick on that one. I think there's multiple purposes, and it depends what your end goal is. I mean, if you went one or the other, I mean, it's not going to suit everybody. And from my standpoint, there's no way in hell I would be able to be developing the pineapple fields with female plants. I couldn't feminize that when I've spent 10 years building both lines. So from my standpoint, it's essential for me to grow regular seeds, but I need males. So, and with number counts nowadays, there's, Oregon has a 4-plant number count. You can have 4 plants. So if you do males and females, you might be screwed out of a couple plants. And last year, I mean, there's even so many people that are new to the industry, they don't even differentiate seeds. They just assume they're gonna grow a plant and it's gonna have buds. Our seeds have regular on them, and I've been contacted by a couple growers that were saying, "Hey, I got a herb," and I was like, "Send me a picture," because I test and grow out all my lines. I'm like, I need to see this, and it's a male. It's a beautiful male, but even with the seeds being marked regular, unfortunately, some people just bypass that information altogether. So, make an informative purchase or whatever you're going to do your research about it, and really work towards your own goal. I'm not trying to sell you my seeds. I only do regular, but I think there's a lot of people that should grow feminized for their situations, but that's just my opinion. So.
It's true what they say, ladies and gentlemen, all good things must come to an end, but before they do, the fortune is in the follow-up, and we have so much talent, so much passion, so much knowledge here on this panel. Could you all please give us your parting words, and where can we find you later to follow up?
Names, too, please.
Okay, name. Rick Campanella, Mr. Soul, Brothers Grimm Seeds. I want to take a moment, just apologize. I didn't understand the forum here many times when I've been invited to these things. It was meant to be a debate, and I came in late. I apologize for my disruption with the other members of the panel and yourselves. Where can you find me? BrothersGrimmSeeds.com online, and Instagram, Brothers Grimm Seeds, booth number 506, and I'll pass the mic on to my esteemed colleagues.
Andrea Lantz, Plymouth County Growers Growing Supplies. You can find me here. I'll be walking around for a while later today. Other than that, you can find me on Plymouth County Growers Growing Supplies.com, and I also have some business cards. If you happen to see me, I'll be sticking around for a little while. I can hand those out. You can give me a phone call, look me up online. I'll be happy to have a chat with you. And thank you, everybody, for coming. It's been awesome.
Rick Naya, Executive of New Hampshire Normal, New Hampshire's primary cannabis activist and lobbyist. I write laws and rules. That's what I do. I help our citizens. You can find me on any of the social media. Just Google Rick Naya. And if you need any information regarding where we're going in New Hampshire, and you'd like to know about our Farmers Collective, New Hampshire Cannabis Company, Newer New Hampshire, or altmass.com, please have a look, and we'll be happy to return any information you might have regarding our genetics and the future of where New Hampshire is going with the industry. And thank you so very much for having me on the panel.
So Dana Danko, High Times Magazine, hightimes.com. The book is on Amazon. I'm also selling and signing copies of it at the Sweet Leaf Nutrients booth here at the Harvest Cup. And, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Danny Danko, HT is Instagram, and then Danny Danko at all the other ones. And thank you very much. for having me here in New England, where my grow career got started. So it's really exciting. In fact, Worms Way here in Worcester was my original grow shop. So, and we're talking more than 20 years ago. So it's really exciting to be back here full circle with the legalization, and just keep in mind that, like, I know there's a lot of fear out there about legalization, but the truth is it's better than prison. You know what I mean? And like, we have to keep that in mind, and younger generations have to understand that, like, yeah, we got to jump through hoops, and yes, there's a lot of regulation, and yes, we got to deal with all these suits and big companies and everything else. But it comes with the caveat that we're going to release all the prisoners that are locked up for nonviolent offenses. We're going to grow our own so we can keep out of their, poisonous businesses, and we're going to get social use so we can get together in places and consume cannabis like grown adults, and so let's please keep that all in mind, and work towards a future where we're all happy with the quality and the quantity and the cleanliness of our cannabis.
I'm Rick Leone, also known as Mosca. I'm the Chief Cannabis Officer, CCO, for Mosca Seeds. Have brochures here, so if you guys want to look at what we have available, more than welcome to. I guess party words, I would say, share the love. If you find something that you do when you're growing, tell your friends, have them benefit from what you've learned, and really share that information. And it's, I'm finding that the community is, really a small one, and you run into a lot of familiar faces at a lot of these shows. So, just stay positive about the plant. It's all about love. So, thanks.
Yeah, my name's Chris. Go by Professor P. It's an alias that's been online for way too long. But yeah, you can find me through Dynasty Genetics online. I'm down at booth 724 if you guys want to come down and get a free photo. I do a lot of macro photography and stuff, so if you want to get some, come on down. But for parting words, I think that the plant attracts a lot of different people, many that are like-minded, even if we have conflicting beliefs, or, someone likes red or someone likes blue, you gotta understand that we're all coming from some sort of background, especially like the older people in this industry. We've been through the gauntlet, whether friends being arrested or us going through, legal problems. Even plants, I still have the cough, and I've had it since '99. The original cough, and what that plant went through to still be alive it's pretty unbelievable. And I had a friend, my friend that gave it to me ended up serving prison time for a grow, nonviolent, and so just being compassionate about people's paths, and keep that in mind when you are setting out for your goal, whatever it may be. A lot of people have gone through shit to get here, so. Please be respectful for one another and their journeys. So, thank you.
You follow up with them if you have questions, and then I'm just going to grab a picture of the panel. And our next panel will be starting in 15 minutes. How to grow hemp. Questions about hemp? The hemp. Can you grab a picture of this pretty please? Appreciate you.